I'm reading from Matthew 7:21-23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name? And so do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.
Good morning, church. You guys sound merry and bright this morning. I'm excited to hear that. I've been informed that not everyone knew that there was a special hot cocoa station out there today. So if you missed on spiking your sugar earlier, make sure you stop on the way out and get all the fixins. A couple of the ladies have taken it upon themselves to make it a little special for us this morning. And Miss Crystal Imsoff, who has the most intricate cookie designs of all time, really outdid herself this morning too. There may be some left. They were going fast, I don't know, but you don't want to miss those cookies. I got a question for you guys this morning. Some of you guys who are with me on social media platforms may have seen a variation of this question a few days ago, but I want to ask you first, what is your favorite Christmas song? We are a couple days away. This is one of those rare audience participatory moments today. Feel free to let your voice be heard. Any favorites out there? Little Drummer Boy? Well, we have something to say about that in a few minutes. I'm glad someone is repping for Pa-Rumpa Pum Pum today. Any other favorites? Is that all? We don't. Joy to the World? We sing that here sometimes. There's something over here. What'd you say, Sherb? Silent Night. A classic. That's the one I've loved since I was in kindergarten and heard it for the first time. I thought that was the funniest thing ever. I do want to ask, though, more importantly, what's your least favorite Christmas song? And the reason why is because I asked this a couple of days ago on social media, and I've never had engagement like this. There were hundreds of people. For as much as we love Christmas, it seems that, we love to hate some things about Christmas just as much. Do we have any non-favorites? Could you guess what the top 5 least favorite Christmas songs might be? Anyone have a guess? Some of them have already been named, and so we're going to have some church dissension this morning. Little Drummer Boy was not in the top 5 most hated, but it was a dark horse candidate that came out of nowhere. We don't like onomatopoeia in songs. I don't know why, Hoke. I don't know. Grandma got run over by a reindeer, peculiarly, was mentioned by a lot of ladies who may be boomer and above as their least favorite. That was in the top 5. Well, the 5th most hated out of hundreds of responses was Santa Baby. A lot of people grossed out by Santa Baby. No further comment. The number 3 most hated was Last Christmas. I know, I get it, but no, look, some people you can take a Hallmark movie and make it into a song about Christmas, and to some people that's not their thing. Last Christmas was number 3. Number 2 was the I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas song. It was number 2. And I like this one because it was educational for me. Someone said, I hate the hippopotamus song and I hate the voice. And someone jumped in as an ardent defender, just white knight, and said, do you know a zoo made that song to raise money to get an actual hippopotamus? And it was a 10-year-old boy. And I was like, I better shut this thread down because we're starting to get very heated. That was number 2. And that surprised me because I did not even have that in mind. And the number 1 most hated Christmas song, it's time. Yeah. Every November, she crawls out of her crypt, slays what's left of Michael Bublé, and takes over. Look, this was funny to me because people named songs, but when we got to this, they named a whole person. I said, what's your least favorite Christmas song? And they just said, Mariah Carey, period. That is a strong level of distaste, a whole person. So I want to say, sorry, Mariah, if you ever see this, please don't copyright strike us. I'm I'm going to share with you what my least favorite Christmas song is this morning. And actually, there are actually two of them, and one of them was on the top 5 dishonorable mention list, like not quite in the top 5, but a lot of people seem to share this, so I feel pretty good about it. And for me, one of these is the Christmas Shoes song. Like, I hate Christmas shoes as much as Alan hates Christmas cookies by George Strait. He thinks it's the worst thing that was ever created. He made me listen to it last week. I'll never forgive him. That's why I had to say it this morning. I know Christmas Shoes is a sweet song, but I can remember the first time that I ever heard it, and it made me feel feelings as a young testosterone-infused man that we're not supposed to feel. I remember riding in the car and listening to the song progress, and sir, I want to buy these shoes for my mama, please. And I'm sitting there like, what is going on right now? This does not feel good. Christmas is supposed to be merry and bright. I do not like that song. Anything but Christmas Shoes. But there's another song that's not Christmas Shoes that is my least liked song, and I'm torn about it because I actually love the song. But the messaging in the song, as the years have gone, have created a problem for me. And no one mentioned it as their favorite this morning, and no one mentioned it as their most hated. And it's a song that is the most jubilant of all. It's sung in the most joyous and festive way. It gets covered every single generation. And underneath of the roaring riffs and exclamation, I feel like I've found something treacherous. And if you'll allow me for a few minutes this morning, I'm going to be something of a Grinch, because that song is going to help us get where we need to go today. And here's how that song goes, okay? That song goes like this. You better watch out. You better not cry. Already sounds like something my dad said to me when I had to get in trouble at school. If you ever had a dad that said, I'll give you something to cry about, it's not happy. It's not a Merry Christmas. We go way beyond a lump of coal. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. And I can almost hear the Jackson 5. Santa Claus is coming to town. He's making a list and he's checking it twice. He's going to find out who's naughty and nice. Santa Claus is coming to town. He sees you when you're sleeping. Santa, we good? He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. Santa, are you threatening me right now? Oh, you better watch out. Yeah, he's threatening you right now. You better not pout, you better not cry. I'm telling you why, because Santa Claus is coming to town. I got a problem with the lyrics of this song because I love Santa Claus, but Santa Claus needs a new public relations team because in 2024, you're going to get canceled watching people sleep and making threats like this. Santa, this is creepy. I don't know how old you actually are, but you've been around a long time. You can't be creeping like that, Santa Claus. I think he's got to update. And I think we got to think about some of the things we've commonly come to believe about Santa a little bit more closely, because the implications of those built-up beliefs take us into other aspects of our life, I think, without even realizing it sometimes. And so this is a message that I call Good for Goodness Sake. We're going to point out where this anthem leads us. And it's not the worst thing about the song that Santa Claus is watching me while I sleep, and it's not the worst thing about the song that he's making a list or checking it twice. It's actually kind of ironic for me. The part about this song that I really don't like is that it creates a reality in which conflicts with the title of the song and the line of the song. The main line of the song is, be good for goodness sake, but if you actually listen to what the song is saying, it creates a reality in which you're going to be good for anything other than goodness sake. You'll have to be good for a bunch of other reasons, and none of them is to be good for actually goodness sake. It's a really subtle thing, but I think it's profound. It creates a world in which we are striving for good, not for goodness sake, but we're striving for good in order to get good in return. Be good for goodness sake. Good for goodness sake would be good things happening out of the natural overflow of who we actually are without the expectation of return. That's good for goodness sake. But my friends, when you sat on that lap, and we've all been there, some of you have already been there this year, and you come with that list, and you come with those demands, and you say, now look, Santa, I am a good kid. You are going to pay what you owe come Christmas morning. And if not, we're going to have a problem. And that might sound silly, but I've got a video that illustrates this state of mind that we can slip into sometimes, even when we're sitting on Santa's lap. Now, this is a kid who's from the UK. He's British, and so just know that over there they call Santa Father Christmas. So if he says Father Christmas in the video, don't be alarmed. There's a little bit of a language gap, but I think you're going to get the point here. This young man has got a bone to pick.
You're on the naughty list.
I will swear, trust me.
Well, that's why you're on the naughty list, because you're being naughty right now. So you're going to be on the naughty list if you keep talking like that.
No, because Father Christmas is not being very nice to me.
Because you're being naughty, so you're on the naughty list.
No, I'm not. I'm on the good list, actually.
You're not, because you ain't being good.
I'm on the good list. If you keep saying that word again and again and again, I'm not on naughty list.
Father Christmas rang me last night when I was at work and said, you better tell Jackson to start being a good boy or he's going to stay on the naughty list and he won't get no presents for Christmas. That's what he said to me. So you got to start being a good boy.
I'm cut to him.
No, you won't do. No, what?
I'm going like this. Punch him. Punch his beard off.
You're just silly, man.
Then trust me, I'm not on bad list.
You're on the naughty list, mate.
No, I'm not.
Well, then be a good boy, then. You're on the naughty list.
I will swear, trust me.
Well, that's why you're on the naughty list, because you're being naughty right now. So you're going to be on the naughty list if you keep talking like that.
No.
Thank you. Okay. For some reason, that video comes up to me every year, and I think, man, that kid is hilarious. He just threatened to punch Santa's beard off. Like, we get this conception that we are owed something by doing what we're supposed to do or what we ought to be in life. And sometimes we don't have that sort of an idea, this kid who's just being really silly, saying that he's on the good list and arguing with his father. Some of us are more nervous. We might not say, Santa, you're going to pay what you owe or I'm going to uppercut you. You say, I know I haven't been perfect, but I have tried to be really good. So Santa, please bring me that PS5. Bring me that Nintendo Switch. I bet there's some people ask Santa for a Nintendo Switch this year. Anybody out there? Oh, he knows. He knows. The problem is this isn't good for goodness sake. What we end up doing is we try to be good for good enough's sake, to be good enough to get what we want out of it. And make no mistake, family, being good for goodness sake and good enough for goodness sake is an idea that most of us will carry out of our innocent Christmases of our youth into almost every aspect of our life. And let me get a little bit more serious here as we continue. Here's the important part for all of us. From the time we're small, we are programmed to see the world in this way. We absolutely live lives that function as or on a performative feedback loop, actually, and that we do good things and we get good things in return, and we do bad things and we get bad things in return. All the way from the time you were sitting into a high chair and not getting dessert unless you finished your meal, or you were doing chores for allowances as a reward for doing those well, or if you got good grades, you would have a special meal or presents, or if you did well in school, that would become a scholarship and opportunities in life. Our whole lives have actually been structured this way. It just becomes natural. This is the path of least resistance for how our brains and our minds and our hearts understand reality. And it's not just that way with the good. We come to understand negative reinforcement this way as well. We're told not to lie, and not to lie just because it's bad, but we're also told that if you lie, eventually it'll be found out, and the end is going to be way worse than if you just told the truth in the beginning. So we're actually taught to live and breathe a life where not only do we do good things in order to receive good things by our good merit, but we also don't do bad things in order to avoid the misfortunes of life and reinforce our good merit. Sometimes this leads us to asking questions like, why do bad things happen to good people? And that question comes from this wiring that gets instilled in us from a very early age. And all of this leaves us prone to a weakness that is only answerable by a deep understanding of the gospel. Because how easy it is for us to live our entire lives with a relationship to God and our view of God looking a lot like this. I mean, how many times have we unknowingly approached our relationship with God as if he's nothing more than a cosmic Santa Claus, wherein my goal in life is to convince him that I have been good enough through my do-gooding to receive whatever he's going to dispense on that day out of his heavenly bag. And before you think I'm stretching the metaphor here, I just want you to stop and think about the wording of the song one more time, if we can. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. He's making a list and he's checking it twice. I don't know about you, that sounds a whole lot like the book of life. Wait, did we just describe Santa as an omniscient being who has the standard of morality, who dispenses favor and justice and punishment to those who meet the standard of goodness, or punishment on those who fail to do so? One who is certainly coming back and is not wiping tears from your eyes, but telling you to keep them out of your eyes to begin with. Family, we even pray to God like we used to bargain with Santa. We say, Lord, I know I'm not perfect. Try to do right by everyone. I try to be honest. And if I've lived a good enough life, please give me that home in heaven with you. Now wait just a doggone minute. Easy the transition is for us. It becomes for us to try and appease Santa. And that just easily flows into appeasing a God that we have created in Santa's image. And how quickly we learn to live a life that actually isn't good for goodness sake, which was the goal. Instead, we live a life where we desperately are trying to be good enough for goodness sake. And family, those are two very different things. There's an incredibly famous section of scripture right inside our current study in the Sermon on the Mount that deals with this very thing. But I think, unfortunately, we read this part of the sermon in partial context. We have a tendency, since the Sermon on the Mount is pretty long, to hack it to pieces and read it piecemeal and try to assign its own context to each section. But if you remember earlier in our study, we talked about how Jesus is building layers on his teaching from the very beginning. Just like a city that would end up on a hill, the entire sermon is a continuous stream of thought and teachings that are built on top of each other. And this section that was read for us in our scripture this morning actually addresses this in a surprising way. And the gospel subverts this type of good for good, bad for bad idea completely. Just to remind you guys, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has been redefining to his audience what they thought a good life was. And he's been challenging us and them not to just live one out, but to get to the heart of the matter. And beginning back in Matthew chapter 5, where we started this study, he started to address every facet of life. And he redefined life. He redefined the kingdom. He redefined righteousness. And he pressed into every aspect of our lives. You have heard it said, but I say to you. You have heard it said, I say to you. This is what righteousness has looked like, but righteousness really in the kingdom looks like this. And so he's taught us that the law from the very beginning was supposed to not just create behavioral modification, but heart transformation. And he's taught us that it's supposed to be making us into a different kind of person. The challenging nature of this sermon I love, but it's depicting what a life of true righteousness looks like. And eventually, we reach this iconic statement in chapter 7, one that we've heard expounded on time and time again, and it goes, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Now, usually, we've heard something like this in relation to this statement, and even in my case, I've sadly assumed, because of this do good for goodness sake assumption, that this is a comparison between the godly wide way of the world and the narrow, difficult way of people that are trying to live a good life and serve God. That's how it was originally taught to me, if not explicitly, implicitly. It's how I received it, probably because that's how my entire life has been organized. And I don't know if you're with me on that, but if you think about this statement, the wide and narrow way, you've probably thought, this is why I'm trying to be good, because I want to be on the narrow way. The wide way is easy. The wide way is for people that don't care about God, and they just want to do whatever they want to do. Life is fun. Make it a party. Lots of people are going to do that, but few people are going to have the discipline and the faith and the restraint to live the more difficult, righteous life. But family, can we pause for a minute and consider that to interpret this statement this way ignores the context of the sermon altogether? And we can't ignore the context of the sermon, or we will not get what Jesus is actually saying, and that puts us in danger. The context of the Sermon on the Mount is that Jesus, back at the beginning of chapter 5, if you remember we studied this, in verse 20 said, I tell you this, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That means that the context of what Jesus is teaching in the sermon is comparing and contrasting the righteousness of the Pharisees and scribes with the real righteousness of his kingdom, which he is now proclaiming. And this is evidenced more and more by his handling of all the topics through the "you have heard it said, but I say to you" section. This whole sermon is set to compare the people of God and saying that we need to have a righteousness that exceeds the Pharisees and the scribes. And the Pharisees and the scribes, if they had anything, they had behavioral modification. If they had anything, they were willing to do difficult things to try and be good in the sight of God. They had behavioral modification, but they did not have heart transformation. So when we go to Jesus' statement about the wide and narrow way, and we divorce it from the context of the sermon, we are assuming that he has now abandoned his message and his teaching for the entire sermon that has preceded this moment. And if we assume that he has done that, he's now randomly talking about people that don't care about God at all. And I would say to you, I will never even be able to touch the hem of Jesus' garment as a teacher. But as a teacher, I know if I start this sermon and go 90% of the way through on one topic, and in the last 10% introduce a totally new topic, that is not an effective way to teach. That is not how you close. That is not how you drive home your point. That is not how you would change the hearts of people who are in attendance. And so, look closely at what he says. I so often read this section with dyslexic eyes. I switch it around and I automatically read it that it would say something like this. I automatically read it as, wide is the way that leads to destruction, then difficult is and narrow is the way that leads to life. As if to say, those worldly people out there who don't care about God are going to take the easy way of doing what they please, but it leads to destruction. And my job is to walk this difficult, narrow path so that I can get through the gate at journey's end, that I can make it if I've been good enough. But do you see here where you read it closely that it doesn't really say that at all? Do you see how I switched it up, how I like Santa Claus the order of things that Jesus says in the twinkle of an eye? Because Jesus says, first, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is narrow and difficult is the way. But when I've read this in the past, I put the path first and the gate at the end. Jesus puts the gate first and then the path after. What's the gate? Jesus is the gate. He is the door. He is the only way. It's narrow because there's no other way to the Father except through him, and no other name under heaven by which you can be saved. He is the gate, but it can't come by do-gooding or any other means. And so what that means is the passage is not saying that there are a lot of people out here who don't care, and since they don't care, they walk on the wide way, but you who are trying to live good lives are on the narrow way, because we know how difficult it is to actually do that. It's saying that there are many people who think they are living good lives. Many who have the righteousness like that of the Pharisees. Many who are trying to be good enough for goodness sake. And they are on the wide path, and it is a path that leads to destruction. It is saying that there are a few who enter by the narrow gate. Few who find righteousness that exceeds that of the Pharisees. Few who get outside of trying to be good enough for goodness sake. Few who actually try to enter by me and my righteousness. There are few who actually receive and accept that gift. Now, if the point was not driven home, Jesus continues to say a few moments later, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. And on that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, do we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, probably the scariest thing I could think of ever hearing, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Now, can't you see that those coming to Jesus on that day are coming with lists of good things done in his name? They come with incredible deeds. They even come with miracles. And Jesus says, I never knew you. What is striking to me about this passage is that when they come with their list of good deeds, Jesus does not look at them and say, you're lying. You didn't really cast out demons. You didn't really prophesy in my name. You didn't really feed the hungry. You didn't really heal the sick. You didn't really go to church or synagogue every Saturday or Sunday. You didn't really live this life that you're saying that you're living. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about the real definition of the word hypocrite? And how our modern understanding of the word hypocrite is someone that says one thing but does another, but that wouldn't be accurate in Jesus' context, because in that context, it really just meant an actor. And what Jesus was saying is, the reason why you're doing things are far from my heart. He is giving the same exact teaching in a stronger, more direct way when he says this. He doesn't say, no, you didn't. He says, the spirit with which you did these things, the heart and the intent with which you did these things, the reason you did these things is utterly estranged from me. The reason you did these things is not the reason I asked you to do them. Family, this is a sobering picture of what the end of living a life of trying to be good enough for goodness sake actually is. This is the end of engaging a holy God and Lord Jesus as if they are a cosmic Santa Claus. This is the end of trying to live a life that is just good enough to essentially put God in our debt. To be able to come to God on that day and say, Lord, I wasn't perfect, but I tried to do right by everybody, and I was honest, and I went to church, and I tried to raise my kids as well as I could, and I tried to be faithful, and I gave, and I did all of these things. Jesus is saying the end of that approach to me is not what you think it is. How sad to come to God with this self-defense only for him to look at me and say, Marcus, you are on the wide way. You thought you could do this. You thought that your do-gooding could earn you what only I can do for you. I want to be honest with you guys. I am trying to live a good life, and I think everybody in this room is too. But I know on that day in the judgment when God says to me, give an account for your life, if I come with any other defense, any other strategy, any other thing but the name of Jesus, I'm done. I got nothing to bring. Either my righteousness is filthy rags or it's not. And either on that day I'm dressed in his righteousness alone or I'm not. I can't come with a list of deeds. I can't come with my do-gooding, my rule-keeping. I can't come with things that I think make me worthy. He alone is worthy. He alone is good. The heart of the problem is that a life lived in attempt to be good enough for goodness sake creates a situation where our salvation is purchased by us and received as payment for our performance instead of it being a gift of grace received in gratitude. I want to say that one more time, because if you get anything this morning, I hope you get this. The heart of our problem as people is that a life lived in attempt to be good enough for goodness sake creates a situation where our salvation is purchased by us transactionally and received as a payment for our performance instead of the gift of grace received in gratitude that it actually is. So how do we overcome this subtle, natural proclivity to try and win God over by not being on the wide way? I think the answer is more simple than it may seem. And I would suggest to you this morning, the answer to this is that we need to only accept the gift. Accept the gift. Yeah, the gift. Now that sounds a lot more like a Christmas sermon, doesn't it? Accept the gift. A Christmas for us is about receiving gifts in many instances. It's how we show love and affection to those of us those of our loved ones who are around us. But I want to tell you that there are some gifts that are actually really hard to receive. Some of them are easier than others. And the gift that we have to accept from God is actually a difficult one to receive. Let me give you just a silly example. Let's say in a few days, we open up our gifts at the Stenson house, and I pull out from under the tree a book, and I open it up, and I'm excited. I think it's going to send me down some theological nerd hole that would be a lot of fun to share with you in an overly long-winded sermon. But instead, I open up that gift, and the title of the book from my lovely wife says, How 5 Tips to Cut Fat Fast. And I open up another book, and Alan has put this one under our tree, and I open it, and it says, Overcoming Selfishness. Now, if I look at those gifts and I say, honey, thank you. I can't believe Well, I can believe, but Alan, thank you, man. It really means a lot. If I'm going to accept those gifts, I am at the same time needing to admit that I am indeed fat and obnoxious. There's no way to accept that gift without swallowing some pride. It's a hard gift to receive. There are some gifts that mean you have to admit you have flaws and weaknesses and that you need help. Maybe in life in general, there's a friend who maybe figured out that you had a financial debt that you couldn't pay, and they bring you a sum that you could never repay them, and they help you with that financial obligation. That gift requires you to swallow your pride to get you out of that predicament. If that's ever happened to you, you know that you had to swallow some pride, maybe even to ask for help or share with somebody that you were struggling to begin with. And I only use this analogy as a way to say that there has never been a gift offered that will make you swallow your pride more than the gift of Jesus Christ to this world. Jesus' message in this Sermon on the Mount is that in his kingdom, that his gospel means we are so lost, so unable to save ourselves, that nothing less than the death of the Son of God himself could save you. And what that means to me, that from the time I grew up learning to live a life where if I do good, I get good, and if I do bad, I get bad, the gospel means to me that there is no way that I will ever be able to pick myself up, pull myself together by my own bootstraps, and live a good moral life. The gift of the gospel means I can't do it. I can't get it done. Family, there is no universe in which you ever actually will be good enough for goodness sake. Because Jesus even said, only God is good. And that means that the gift of Jesus will not only cleanse us from our sin, but he also will cover us with his righteousness freely and fully. If you think that this is a depressing message, I hope that you're not misunderstanding me in that way. What I want you to come away with this morning is to say that the gift is free, but you have to accept it. What I want you to understand is that you can't be good enough, but Jesus is. He is good enough. He is enough. In a world where everyone is encouraging each other by saying, you are enough, I want us all to remember that only Jesus is enough. Do not fall for the trap. When you let this truth of the gospel get down into your soul, when you let it really permeate and get deep down in there, you will be able to stop doing good things in order to try and get good things from God. You'll be able to stop trying to be good just to get good. You'll be able to do good things because you are grateful for the incomprehensible, undeserved good that he has showered you with despite your shortcomings. And your goodness transforms from a kind of cosmic Santa manipulation, and it turns back into a gift to God that is born of gratitude and jubilation. Then you will do good, truly for goodness sake, because the only way to be good for goodness sake is to do good for his sake. To do good for his sake because of what he was willing to do for our sake. It's free, but you have to accept it. This season is a time where most people are forced to realize that the gift has finally arrived. That the gift is received by faith. That gift is not cheap. That gift will cause you to swallow your pride, but that gift glorifies the giver. So in closing this morning, I just have a simple question. Not what is your favorite or least favorite Christmas song. Not if you've been good for goodness sake. Not what you're getting under the tree in a couple of days. But have you actually received the gift? Have you accepted it? Or are you trying to earn that right? Family, I say this with all compassion. You will never get to the end of that wide, wide road. But there is a narrow road where the gate is first, and Jesus will walk with you no matter how narrow or difficult the way will become. That is where true goodness is found. So this morning, if you have not met him, I would encourage you to take a step towards him. He will meet you at the gate. Please come as we stand.